Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is AJ Rettger. I'm the author of Oathbreaker, and I'm joined today by Sean Crow, author of Godless Lands, Valhalla Steel, and I'm sorry, I don't know the sequel to Valhalla Steel.
Quenched in Blood. Yeah.
Quenched in Blood. There it is. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate you having me on, or joining, not having me on, but having you on.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, man. I'm pretty stoked.
All right. So for those who are tuning in who are not really familiar with your work, what's a quick elevator pitch of Godless Lands?
Yeah, so think bubonic plague that affects everything. I mean, vegetation, every animal you got. So it basically runs through the world, decimates the population, and you're left with these survivors. Like small communities lock themselves away, call them havens. They're called havens because they were the only safe place to go. You're watching entire crop yields just crumble. Only a few things are still growing. So you have this huge catastrophic event, and then the book kind of takes place about 10 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing people start to rebuild, but it's like a whole new world. I mean, it is a whole new world to them because you can't survive outside of the havens without lots of know-how. So it's been fun to dive into that world because think of a medieval Western almost. You have small little places out there. That's kind of the feeling I was going with.
Yeah, for sure. And I liked what you did differently than your typical post-apocalyptic is that your plague devastated nature.
Yeah.
And like it usually like you see like The Last of Us or I Am Legend, nature kind of comes back and like food and stuff like that isn't really an issue. Whereas yours, it definitely is, especially when you're outside these little communities.
Yeah, and people find all kinds of get sustenance. So
yeah.
There's some bad ones and there's some smart ones. So
yeah, for sure. So what was your inspiration behind this book?
I was actually I was just writing short stories at the time. I'd finished a really big project. It was actually God's Reborn. I haven't published it. It was like 190,000 words, just a big 2-year project that I'd written it, rewritten it, and I was trying to go traditional. And it was at that point I was kind of like, man, I don't feel like this is my best writing. I'm going to hold off. I like the concept, but it's just one that needs to sit on the back burner until I, got some more books out. And so I was like, I need to write just a solid story, just a story, that I would enjoy, that I would pick up and read and say, dang, that was a good read. Doesn't have to be, I feel like a lot of people want to make these massive, huge worlds. And I was like, no, I kind of want like a Louis L'Amour, like a David Gemmell, a Louis L'Amour kind of a read where you're reading about the situation. It's not grand scale. It's not world ending. It's people, people in bad situations, people justifying things, people trying to survive. And so I like that feeling. And that's kind of where it came from. And while I was writing these short stories, I actually was posting out to artists. I was like, hey, if anybody has artwork and they just want a short story, I'm happy to write it. I'll send it to you. It can be yours. I was just looking for inspiration, and I tagged on to Thomas Ducek's artwork, which he did the cover of Godless Land. So, and he and I got to talk, and we started kind of developing this world. I go, well, how do you picture your art? Like, how does that come? What is this that you're coming up with? And he and I started talking. I kind of liked some concepts, and I was like, hey man, I want to kind of take this and develop this if you're okay with it. And I ended up writing like 3 short stories. They're all on my website. And it was all different characters that actually I used in the Godless Lands book. There's a short
Nice.
Iggs coming to the farm. There's one about Ferris running into Bethany. And that one actually is different because it was basically gave me the idea for that character, but I ran it a different route. So the short story doesn't make sense in the world, but it was just all these stepping stones to say, hey, this would be a fun world to write a book in. So
nice.
Godless Lands kind of came to life and went from there.
Nice. That's awesome. Especially that you can collaborate with the artist too.
Yeah. Thomas is great. I didn't even realize like how big he was until he started like sending me work. Like he's done work for Games Workshop and all kinds of, he's huge. I was like, oh, wow, okay. he's a really nice guy, and he seems to like it. So, you know, it's been fun working with somebody that's in that field. You know, same thing with Valhalla Steel and Quenched in Blood. You know, Anthony Valiakonis. It was the same situation. I wrote a bunch of short stories for him, and we got to talking and started to enjoy each other's company. And now we're friends. We play games online sometimes, and you know, and collaborate. It's been a fun experience. Just for every book I write, it's just something new. You meet new people, find different interests, and yeah,
Absolutely. And if anyone watching or while we're live has questions for Sean or me, just feel free to put them in the chat and I'll throw them on the screen and we'll try and answer your plethora of questions. It's always fun when we have an audience interaction. So when you're not writing books, how do you usually spend your days?
So I teach at a correctional facility. I've been doing it years. Before that, I was a special education teacher. So my days are pretty busy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you know, crazy job. It's a, you know, sometimes you've got some rough people, but you deal with it. Other times it's smooth, but yeah, so I do that as a living. And then, in the evenings, I kind of come home, spend time with my family. Really, I'm a family guy. So it's kind of work, family, and then whatever other time I have that goes to writing. Kind of realized that once I started having kids, I had to cut off a lot of the old hobbies, you know, and find something that I can really latch my teeth into because we only have so much time, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to be great at something. The thing I want to be great at is writing. So that's kind of what started it. The birth of my daughter got me really hyper focused. So my schedule's not too crazy. I don't have time to do a whole lot of other stuff. It's just work, family, writing. That's about it. Occasionally I'll go hunting like this year, but
okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm a hunter too. What do you hunt?
Elk, deer. We do archery.
Okay.
We're going to try to shoot some grouse this year, you know, because we're up in the mountains of Eastern Oregon. That's kind of all there is to do here, you know, hunt. Side. So
yeah, that's what it's like in Saskatchewan too, except we don't have the nice mountains. It's just flat.
Just flat.
Which is kind of good because you can see the deer running off for miles.
Yeah, great for rifle.
Yeah.
We're stock one with a bow though. That'd be a little rough.
Yeah, I know a few guys who do bow hunting, and they have to go way up north in northern Saskatchewan, where we finally hit the forests, which is about 2 or 3 hours north of me. So,
like I say, you got to go a ways.
Yeah, you got to go a little bit of ways before it's worthwhile doing bow hunting.
Yeah, I bet.
I know. It's funny you mentioned that you work in corrections because my mother actually did that. She just retired like 2 years ago from working in corrections. Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly don't mind it. Like, I know when I left public school, a lot of teachers were kind of like, "You sure that's what you want to do?" And I was like, "I got thick skin, you know, like it doesn't."
Yeah.
You know, they just need help too. Just like everybody else, they just made a couple of mistakes. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I used to be a public school teacher as well. So.
Oh yeah.
Just, really small world and just commonalities there. And we are joined by the lady I had last week, Holly Tinsley, author of We Men of Ash and Shadow. Glad you could join us, Holly. So going forward, who are your favorite characters in the Godless sense, or even just favorite characters that you've written?
You know, they all have a little spot. You know, there's never a character I'm not invested in. But definitely favorites from Godless Lands. Probably Sir Arlo actually is a big favorite. Really liked the character, and when I wrote that short story, that was the first one I wrote for Thomas. My wife had gone septic after our last kid, and there were some scary times. You know, didn't know if she was going to make it or not, and you know, it gets you thinking like, you know, what would you be if you lost everything? You know, like how would you rebuild yourself, especially when the world around you is falling apart, right? And so that's kind of where Arlo came from. It was like, well, how bad could it get? Like, how bad could if you were to go down that route and you lost everything and you were just left there, what would I become? And so Arlo kind of formed around that. Obviously, he's not me, but there are some aspects of that I really applied to him. I think that's why I latched onto that character a lot. Donovan is a big favorite in that. a lot of him's kind of based around my dad. So
Okay.
I kind of get that old man vibe, that kind of thing. There's you'll see that. Yuri, you ever read Valhalla Steel or Quenched in Blood? Yuri's got a lot of I would say the crow mentality. The people on my dad's side of the family, that's kind of that mentality there. The old war dog, that kind of gritty old boy that sticks around no matter what, like they're there. So those are big favorites of mine. But every single one, Iggs, Donovan, Zia, Bethany, all of them just have, Ferris. There's just aspects that, they're kind of like friends. You write them out and don't make it, and you're kind of like, well, that was a crappy day. I killed off that person, so I'm gonna stay and step away, But
Yeah.
yeah,
I know when I was writing Oathbreaker, I had one of my characters that you get to know pretty early on died, and when I wrote that, I was like, I'm kind of sad, like that I just killed this guy off.
yeah, I get that, and you're just, you know what? I think I'm done writing today. I think I'm just gonna step away, mourn a little bit, and come back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that, and because that's one thing in literature that drives me crazy is authors that don't kill off characters. Like if there's no threat, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but if there's no risk in the story, I'm not invested.
Yeah.
Know that a character might not make it or might not have the happy ending, and I think that's why probably, and I'm just assuming for you as well, as Grimdark it pulls me that direction because I feel like in that genre nobody is really safe. Like
Yeah.
things can happen, and authors like that kind of get it. They're like, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a happy ending. It might be, you might have a good ending, but it's going to cost something. Like it comes free. So I like that mentality. I like that in stories. So yeah, I mean, seems like the way to go.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I know when I finished Oathbreaker and like all my friends and family bought it and read it, I got a couple texts like, "What the fuck was that ending?" Like,
yeah, I get that.
my one friend just said, "I don't want to read any of your other books because this is too depressing for me."
No, I get that, man. But I don't know. Like, does it bother you? Because it doesn't bug me.
No,
like,
that's the response I want more
yeah,
so.
yeah. Like, damn,
Yeah, like,
why? Why'd you do that to me?
yeah,
If they're feeling something, you're doing something right. That's kind of how I feel.
yeah,
You make somebody feel something, then you're doing the right. You got the right pros.
yeah, exactly. So if you could co-author with any author, alive or dead, who would you co-author, or would you co-author?
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
In college, I had author stuff and some co-writing, and I've tried it off and on, and I've done it with some really great people, but I'm selfish. Like I like my ideas. I see my ideas and I want to run with them. And it's not fair to think that way, especially if you're working with somebody, but I don't know. When it comes to creating, I have a really hard time of doing it with anybody. If I were to maybe be mentored by somebody or have somebody kind of just, I've never wanted to meet many people. Like I've never idolized people, like celebrities or things like that. But David Gemmell is, if I could have met somebody, that would have been the guy. So I would have loved to sit down and just picked his brain to learn from him. But writing, I don't think I could write with anybody. It would be really hard.
Yeah,
I
that
don't.
would be true.
Who would you write with?
I'm a huge fanboy for Andrew Sapkowski. I mean,
Oh yeah,
just if he asked me to, like, I would just be on a plane to Poland that day.
you just drop everything. But
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of how I feel about Gemmell. Like that was
yeah, that's my guy. Other than that, I don't know. Yeah, like you said, I don't know if I could co-author with someone because I'm kind of stubborn. And like right now, I'm launching into a collaborative project around that's kind of related to Oathbreaker that I can't say too much about. And it's a girl I went to audio engineering school with that I'm working with. And I have no idea how this is going to turn out. I'm staying up late at night because I'm thinking, man, either this is going to be the craziest thing I've ever done that's going to be awesome, or it's going to crash and burn because I'm trying to work with someone and it's going to be hard to get my ideas through to them.
Right. No, and it is though. I mean, we're just all so different, you know, like, and then you throw writing into the mix and you're going to have a different style. You're going to have a different everything. That's just so hard to link it. But there's people that do it. I know, who is it? Coria and Ringo. I see them co-author a lot. Very things. I know Jim Butcher has co-authored a few things. You know, like there's so people that do it. I just, God, I'd really have to apply myself to try to like set my stubbornness, my ego, and all that aside to do it. But it would be hard, definitely.
Yeah, it would definitely be hard. So you mentioned that we kind of went over this. Is that you contacted Thomas to write some short stories to get the cover art? Was this like the first picture that he's done for you for the cover?
Well, so it was kind of interesting. The first short story I wrote was Death Knight, which is actually I modified it, and that became the prologue of Godless Lands. So I've got that little short story on my website, and that was based off of his art piece, which was titled Death Knight, right? Kind of where, you know, a lot of Thomas's pieces inspired me for the characters. You know, I just looked through his artwork and I was like, wow, like I just, whatever it was clicked in my head. I was like, this is great. You know, like this, I had all these ideas for all these characters. But yeah, that was kind of how I went about doing it. I mean, he sent that in, and then he created a piece. I can't remember what it's called, but it has my character Ferris on it. And he goes, I thought about this when you mentioned the doves and Death Knight. And that's why that was part of what helped him with that piece. And so then I saw that and I wrote another short story for that new piece that he released. And it just kind of went from there. You know, we got to talking, and eventually he did the cover. He offered to do the cover, and, you know, we just made that connection. So he's a really busy guy. I don't think he normally does that, but he likes the story. I sent it to him, you know, and he really liked it. I sent him a copy and a big thank you. My dad actually forges like Damascus knives, and my dad wanted to thank him too because he's a big reader. And he made him a Damascus knife. We sent it to him, and yeah,
nice.
Yeah, it's been great working with him. Nice guy. But.
Yeah, I know. It's nice when you have someone like that in your corner from the very get-go. That's just gets what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like being able, like, I was not a social media guy at all. I didn't have a phone before I started publishing my books. Like I hated it. You know, like I wanted nothing to do with it. Leave me alone. If anybody needed to get a hold of me, they got a hold of my wife or my work, and then they get a hold of me. And then my wife and I were talking, and I was getting serious about publishing, and she goes, well, you need to push your stuff on social media. So I got it. And honestly, it has been an invaluable tool because I've been able to make those connections. I mean, with that, heck, I wouldn't be here right now talking with you if you know, I hadn't been convinced that this is how you got to do it. But, you know, and that's a lot of what I see, because, you know, there's so many indie authors, I feel like, but a lot of them don't realize just how much you got to put into it. Like, you got to put some time. You got to get your face out there. You got to talk with people and hustle, you know?
Yeah, you got to grind. I know the two big bookstores in Saskatoon are Indigo and McNally Robinson, and they know me by my face now. They're just like, "Oh, you're here to push Oathbreaker again." I'm like, "Yep, that's me."
Hey, that's really what you got to do. I mean, I've got a plan to start hitting up all the small bookstores around here, and, you know, see if they're interested. Our local one carries it, Jack's Dog. And, you know, I sell it. You know, I'll find times, like you and I were talking earlier. I missed my farmer's market today, but I do that 3-4 times in a summer and sell a few books and get my name out there. So
yeah, exactly. We got a question from Holly, who's asking us, both our books gave strong nostalgic vibes. Are either of us inspired by classic or fantasy movies?
There'll only be one, Tinsley. Highlander. I loved Highlander. I loved those 80s action movies. Yeah, I'd say they probably influenced. I'd say personally more influenced by David Gemmell, read, you know, that literature. Jim Butcher had some big impact, but yeah, I could see that. I could see that kind of action movie nostalgia, maybe. at least for my own. I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, I'm very inspired by film. Like I said, most of my life I wasn't reading until like 2 years ago. So like a lot of my influences came from film and TV shows until I finally started picking up books.
Right.
So I think the biggest one for me was the Lord of the Rings movies were the biggest one. And then once I started getting to reading and I started throwing it, Don Quixote was a huge influence.
Yeah.
And like the start of Oathbreaker is very much reminiscent and very much vibe. Like I have my mentor Sky, she basically said, like, this is giving me strong Don Quixote vibes. I'm like, oh, that's because that's what I liked.
Yeah. No,
Which,
and that's going to happen, I think. So many authors were inspired by stuff, and so we want to take elements of it and apply it, when it came to film, yeah, I mean, I grew up watching those shows, but I'd say like the most impactful ones for me were like mid 90s, late 90s, more like Last Samurai, Art, Gladiator, those
yeah,
big epic films. So you don't see a lot of those anymore, I feel like.
no, just the way everyone does. And Holly said, it's better to burn out than fade away.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's just I think everyone's going in the direction of the digestible series in
Yeah.
terms of no one wants to make those big 3 hour long movies like Braveheart or Gladiator anymore. It's
Yeah.
always like we'll make a season of this.
Yeah. And that's kind of cool though. Like Game of Thrones, I mean, they have a good formula for doing that. Now, say what you will about the content sometimes, but they're very successful. Like that is a successful way to do it. You see the Wheel of Time coming. They're going to do a Lord of the Rings. They're going to do, there's a lot of interesting series coming out that I'm kind of excited for, but at the same time, I'm like, are they going to do it right? Or
Yeah.
are they in whatever political or whatever stuff they feel like throwing in there, which drives me crazy because
Yeah.
politics in general, not one side or the other. I hate it. So
It's fun to write in your books, not so fun to throw in just when you're trying to get away from it, though.
exactly. Yeah. Like it's the one thing I'll never post on social media, any political stuff. Everybody's doing it. I'm tired of hearing it.
Yeah. I'm the exact same way. So when it comes to TV shows or movies, is there any like genres that you like? I got kind of horror vibes when I read Godless Lands and like Walking Dead vibes. Is there any like? Do you steer towards those genres, or are you all over the map?
I'm all over the map. I've got so many ideas in so many directions. Like I'm interested. I'll watch anime. I'll watch horror. I'll watch anything that trips my trigger. Really, it's more of a feeling. Like there's certain gritty films, gritty animated shorts. I like that. Like I can't get into Marvel, right? It's too overpowered, over the top there, and you can predict the ending by the time you sit down on the seat. I like shows that are gonna, play with your emotions, pitch you out there. People are dropping, like it's got to engage me, and I got to feel what's going on is just intense. Because like Marvel, all that doesn't. Yeah, I don't feel the intensity of it because, well, it's just not. You know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I hate that when I watch movies. I mean, and I sit down and I know how it's going to end. The only exceptions to that are like comedies. So like a comedy, I don't care. I'm just there to tune out. And my guilty pleasure is Marvel. I'm a big Marvel fan, so I'm just like, but like you said, I know how it's going to end, but I'm just like, just turn the brain off for a minute and just watch.
I get it. Like, oh, I don't know. That's how we are. Me and my wife, we try to find shows because we're so busy all the time. We try to find shows that like we can sit down in the evening and watch, but sometimes it's like just a rehash. So we'll put on like The Office. God, how many times I've watched that show. I could quote it off the top of my head. It's just like I want to zone out and occasionally go.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to relax for an hour, So
just turn the brain off. And then my one show that I always I just slipped my mind now what it's called. But it's on Netflix and it was a really, really gritty show. Oh, this is gonna bother me.
What was it about? We haven't had Netflix for a while, but we did for a bit.
Oh, it was fuck. I can't even think of what it was about. I just remember there being gore and like lots of blood, and I'm like thinking, this is like really cool. I like this.
Was it that?
Oh, it wasn't on Netflix. It was on Amazon. The Boys.
Oh yeah, I've watched that. Yeah,
Yeah, I like how they twisted the superhero thing, and it's dark and gritty.
yeah, I did like. Second season got a little all over the place, but
Mm-hmm.
I was like, in it. I want to see what happens next season. I'm
Yeah,
engaged. Like, like the approach they're taking with that. Like, yeah, they don't really care. They're in power. They're just going to use it however they want.
yeah.
And then you got a bunch of just normals that are trying to do something.
They're just trying to survive.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's a well done show.
All right, but getting back on topic, on the cover of Godless Lands, you have a quote from one of my favorite authors, Anthony Ryan. Tell us how you managed to swing that.
Honestly, when I decided I wanted to write, I started writing letters to my favorite authors. I just wrote and reached out to him, and Anthony, I saw that he just created like an Instagram, and so I was like, "Hey, man, I love your books. I read your Dracona series. I what is the one Blood Song? Like I really love his prose. I love his writing, and I was like, I would love to send you my book and get your thoughts on it, but I understand you're busy. And that guy has been one of the most responsive and helpful individuals I think I've run into. And I'm not the only one. I've talked to a couple other authors that because he started indie. And so
Yeah,
he encouraged me, kind of gave me some pointers. He's gone through every single manuscript I've written, all three of my books. He's read all three of them and given me feedback, whether it's something I probably want to hear or don't. And he'll just tell you like it is. And he's just been super helpful. Like he seems like a really classy guy. I've only talked to him, messaging, emails back and forth. But seems like a very knowledgeable, very classy guy and very willing to help. So yeah, I just emailed him and I sent it, and he goes, "Hey, I am busy, so it might take a while, but I'll read it." And yeah, that's how I got the quote. So
nice.
yeah, he's been very helpful. John Gwynn, when I was first writing, he would respond to me and answer questions, stuff like that. He was very helpful. And then a bunch of the indie authors, we're all trying to learn from each other. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just reaching out. But I wrote to probably 8 authors, letters just explaining, how their work impacted me and what I appreciated about it and, what they were doing. And, some get back to you, some are really busy, some don't, I've tried to reach out to Ray Coria, who knows how many times. That guy he just doesn't respond. And I've reached out to, some other authors that just, I wrote a letter to Jim Butcher like a month ago just to see if he'd, see it and just know that because I just read his most recent books and loved them,
Yeah.
But again, he was one of those authors I kind of grew up with. After I went through my Gamel phase, I was branching out and I got tired. I kind of dragged out of the Wheel of Time halfway through it because the books kind of started to drag there. And I found Jim Butcher's books and just I remember riding on bus rides, sitting at wrestling tournaments, waiting for just eating his books up, and so yeah, I try to, even if I don't reach that, I hope they read it. Even if they don't respond, I hope they read it and just know that they've had a bigger impact.
Yeah.
They have, they've written, thousands of people have read their books, and that creates future generations of authors. And, I think that's really cool. So,
Yeah. And I'm the same way with, I sent a book to David Dalglish. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I've only ever seen it in print. He wrote the Keeper series.
yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of his, like I read that trilogy and I was just like, man, like, and that was right before I started Oathbreaker. And I was like, and as a thank you, I was just like, can I send you my book? I don't care if you read it or what. It's just like I feel like you deserve to have it.
Yeah.
And he was super nice, said absolutely, send it away. And so it was just perfect. So it's nice that, when you can, I feel like authors are way more accessible too.
Oh, now. Yeah. Especially.
Yeah.
If they have social media, you can send them a message. I have people, that read my books that'll send me a message, and I'm fine with, like, I think that's great. Indie authors that are just getting started, they ever have questions, like, I'm more than happy. I feel like if somebody at the level of like Anthony Ryan and John Gwynn will take the time out of their day to give somebody like me advice, then I should be able to do that if I ever get there. And I want to be able to do that, just pay it forward and help out other people trying to learn the field.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I know one question I have for you is that, do you hide little references in your book? Are you a reference hider in your books, or do you keep everything just in the world?
Like, I'm working on the next Godless Lands book right now, and I do a nod to David Gemmell. Like, I used one of his character names, Finn, from what's the name of that book? Quest for Heroes? Is that it? Hang on, let me look at my bookshelf. Quest for Lost Heroes. Yeah. There's a character named Finn in there, and they're not even the same, but that's kind of like my little nod to Gemmell. I'll use a name or something like that. Little things. I don't try to hide a lot, though. I mean, I try to hide things for future books, so people will go back and be like, oh, yeah, I remember a mention of that. Like my next Valhalla Steel book will be one of the big characters, not necessarily the main character, but a big character will be Santiago, who's like one of the last crusaders in that world. And you run into him in Quenched in Blood. He's just in one chapter. And so I would ask like my beta readers, did that guy stand out? And they'd be like, yeah, that guy, I want to know more about him. Perfect. He's going to be in the next book, so I'll do stuff like that.
Okay.
And sometimes I do it as a test. Like, I want to see how people react. Like, that's kind of how I was doing with my short stories, because I've got tons of short stories on my website that I just would like to write and let people read. That helps with feedback, because if people really like particular things or characters, then I might use that in a novel. So that's just been a great testing grounds to figure out. But other than that, I don't really hide a whole lot, no.
Okay. I know me personally, I hide everything.
Yeah.
I love hiding stuff. And when you first open Oathbreaker, there's a map of my world that I created. And the one big ocean is called the Sea of Tragic Beasts, which is a Fit for an Autopsy album, because I'm a big metalhead.
There you go.
So, and then I post that on my Instagram, and then the band actually liked it and said, like, this is so cool. And I was like, oh my God.
That's cool. Yeah. That's pretty neat. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I got like a reference to Don Quixote in there. I got a reference to a couple other metal artists that influenced me back when I thought I was going to be a rock star. And then there's also a reference to Sapkowski and Tolkien and all the big names in fantasy too.
Tolkien's one of those I really tried to get. I just couldn't, I appreciate what he did for the genre. The guy was awesome, but I just can't get into it.
I loved The Hobbit, and then I tried Lord of the Rings, and I couldn't do it.
Really?
I don't know why it was, because I loved The Hobbit. I read it in school. It was the one book in school that I actually enjoyed reading. And then I bought Lord of the Rings, and I was like, man, like, why is the spark not there?
Right.
Like, I'm like 200 pages in, and I have no investment in the story. Yeah. Maybe it's because I watched the films before and I kind of know what happens, but like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. And maybe it's just the language has changed so much. His wasn't story or anything that bothered me. It was just the way he wrote. It was so detailed. I'm more of a character guy.
Mm-hmm.
All the details, describing a tree for several pages, really was dry.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember thinking that several times when I was reading his works. Like, okay, wrap it up.
Yeah. So like, I tend to speed read in those times. Like Robert Jordan series, that guy. I mean, again, amazing. I've read every book of The Wheel of Time, but man, he probably could have done that in like 6 or 7 books, instead of 14 or whatever it is at the end.
Oh yeah.
But that's just my style, Yeah.
So take us through your right. Oh, sorry. Before I get to that, we got another question from Holly. Second question.
Just like you or you. Well, Arlo's a bad version of me, probably. I don't know. Time from Valhalla Steel, or Tiem. It's spelled Tiem, but I call him Time. I don't care what people call him. I related quite a bit with that guy. And then I'd say Angus too. And there
Oh
are
yeah.
aspects of both of those characters that I think apply. I don't always, like I try to throw myself like, okay, if I'm in this situation, my blood's hot and I'm not thinking straight, what would be the bad decision I'd make? And that'd be more of an Angus choice, like because he's a berserk, right? He just goes crazy. So yeah, there's aspects. I'd say there's aspects in a little bit of every character. I don't know if you're the same. Like
Yeah.
I put a little bit of myself in a lot, and like with my strong female characters, my wife is big with those. I'd say if anybody reads Valhalla Steel, Helen has a lot of my wife. Sigurd has some. Zia from Godless Lands, like there's little bits, my dad's in there, I'd say I have some family members, some friends, I take qualities of them and put them in there, but I'd say those ones for me. And what about you? Do you do that particularly with any?
Yeah, every character's a little chip out of me. I mean, like in my book, Mario is the little kid I was when I was 16, idealistic, and like I know everything that everyone else is wrong. And then I guess the whole book is basically me tuning in my younger self
Yeah.
and just being like, okay, idiot, this is how the world is.
Right. We're going to learn some things.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm running a little bit low, so I wanted to plug it in here.
Oh, no worries. And then when I wrote I guess the villain of my story, because I don't really have like a big bad evil guy.
Yeah.
But the one, I guess, antagonist is Alistair in my book, and he's basically what is me now, just bitch slapping my main character. And just at the end of the book, he kind of just gives it to him and just like, okay, like this is how it is.
There you go.
And yeah, he's a huge plot device. But yeah, like every character has a little bit of me in it, and the only thing that's really tough for me is that the strong female characters that I have in my books. Thank God for my mentor Sky. She is, make sure that like AJ, like this is like, yeah, I can tell you're a man writing this woman. I'm like, okay, how do I fix this then? And she'd give it to me. I'm like, okay, perfect. So like I'm so blessed to have her perspective in so many aspects, but that's definitely the biggest one, is how to, not come across as a man writing as a girl.
Yeah. Actually, Tinsley's one of my beta readers for Quenched in Blood. Thanks, Tinsley. Yeah. But yes, yeah, and I've got to read her book too. I got to read yours. I got to read hers.
Well, hers is amazing. Like I loved it.
Yeah, she made it to the finals, so that's.
Yeah, I did. I saw that. That's awesome for her.
That's an achievement. That's really cool. I'm happy for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Tinsley, if you're online, if you're with us still, for you guys, like the role of evil, right? So like, I personally think that everybody's got a bit of both good and evil in them, right? So and that's one thing I like about the grimdark genre, is I like characters that there's not like a great evil side. There's some evil people. Yeah. I mean, there's some people that just get twisted and keep on going down that rabbit hole, but you can see the choices they make. How do you present, like, do you bring in like that philosophy of good and evil, or is it more of a broad strokes, everybody has it? How do you approach that in your writing? Do you do that?
Yeah, so for myself, evil is very much just everyone has it, a little bit in it, and it's just basically how I approach is that if you're evil is all based on your opportunities presented in your life. It's kind of like if you're at work and you're the last one to cash out in the store, and you have the opportunity, cameras are off, you have the opportunity to take $20 from the cash register. Are you going to do it?
Right. Yeah.
And then some people are presented more opportunities like that, and they get a little bolder and a little bolder until they become what they are. And then some people never have the opportunities and are more innocent, like Mario, that lovable idiot, that main character.
But yeah,
And
kind of interesting. Yeah.
and he's a very, like, if I can toot my own horn here for a little bit,
Oh,
Mario he's not your typical grimdark protagonist because he's very much, I don't know if you've read the Hunger Games at all. They're more YA.
I know a lot about it, but I've never read it.
Yeah. Well, a lot like, well, if you see the movies, you'll probably catch the gist of it too. Like Katniss, Mario is very much reliant on his party to bail his ass out because he just makes dumb decisions because he's a teenager.
Right.
And he's not really the good and evil. He's just that pure, almost like that. I wrote him in the sense that he was a grim, dark reader entering the genre for the first time, not sure what to expect. And then my world is very much the grim, dark genre. And then once he gets in, you're like, oh shit.
Right.
Then,
this is where I want to be at all.
Yeah. It was way, way safer back in school.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I like how you took that aspect. That's an interesting approach. I like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't know if Holly's still with us, but she still hasn't answered the question if we're about good and evil and how we approach evil. Yeah, I'd love to hear her. That was a question I should have asked her last week when she was on with me. But while we wait for her answer, if she's still with us, speak of the devil. Evil is a matter of perspective.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
I also I love Sapkowski, so I'm going to go back to The Witcher. That big speech, if you've watched the first season of The Witcher on Netflix,
yeah,
Henry Cavill does that speech, which is verbatim out of the book. Evil is evil, lesser, greater, middling. It's all the same.
Yeah,
you know, there's no lesser evil. He said, if I have to choose one evil or another, I'd rather not choose at all.
Yeah, I like that. You know, but everybody's going to take, you know, and that's the kind of the interesting. You can write a character that is that way, and then you can write another character that says you're an idiot. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
That out, and it's fun to play with that. What I really don't like is when you have all characters with one kind of mindset or what.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to say this. I'll probably get flack for it. Like, I really appreciate Joe Abercrombie. I think that guy is talented beyond talented, but from what I've read, and I've only read 3 of his books, everybody is just kind of terrible. Like, everybody's just kind of awful. Like, I'm just kind of like, I kind of like you, but now you're slapping women around, and then you're like, I kind of like you, but then you're murdering your best friend there. Okay, well, hard time. I feel like, yes, it's grimdark. It's got to be gritty. But there are good people out there. Like, there are people that strive to be good in the real world. Like, so in a grimdark world, those people exist too. I want to see those existing in such a terrible situation. But I mean, I get it. It's the genre too. So, you know, but
and
yeah,
that's kind of like my work in progress right now. The one character, he's trying to do good. He's an old warrior who's accused of murder, and he's trying to get out of the kingdom essentially before he gets caught. And he's trying to do good, but he's always backed in a corner where he has to kill. Yeah. He's just like, I don't want to, but all right, you want to fight? Let's fight.
Yep. Here we go.
Yeah.
Well, and there's good people that are violent. You know, I've grown up with good, violent people, and you know, it's like you became a monster for a portion of your life, and then you learned how to control that, and now you can apply it when necessary. But there's probably going to be that phase where they're not that great. You know, when you're learning how to be that, you're probably not doing the best, right? But you become a monster, so then you can control it, and then you can point it in a direction and use it when needed. But yeah, I don't know. It's everybody's going to have their own perspective on it, right?
And yeah, what you said there really resonated me with, because like I'm a big fan of, like, yeah, I know you're not a Marvel guy, but the more dark and gritty Marvel is The Punisher on Netflix.
Punisher. I like The Punisher a lot.
Yeah. And like Frank Castle is that. He's the monster, and like a lot of the series he's battling when to dial that in, when to turn it off. And I think that's you know, I've talked to a few veterans. I think a lot of people struggle with that when they come back from overseas.
Oh yeah.
When they're deployment, you know, when to turn that off, because it's drained on you ever since boot camp.
Yeah. Well, I mean, You're trained to go and fight and kill. That's what you're trained to do. I mean, you prepare yourself mentally to do it, you prepare yourself physically to do it, and then you do it. And that sticks with you. You know, like, it's not a good thing, but needs to happen. So I like that. You know, I I am a fan. I believe in good and evil. I in my personal life, you know, but I know not everybody thinks that way. And so you're going to have that, you know, collection of different people and different perspectives. And I think it's important to show that, yeah, you can throw in your own personal beliefs, but then you got to throw in the oppositional stuff too. There are going to be people that, like, that's been one thing that's been really kind of fun for me to write, is literally going into something like you'll have characters that you're like, yeah, I am preaching what I believe here. This is great. But then you got to have that character that literally has good points on the opposite side, you know. So write that character up. Get, you know, one of my favorite, I really got onto Mother Abigail. She plays a role in Godless. And she's a content to not believe in any of the gods or hungry God. There's no creator. There's just what we have here, and here's what we're working with. And she has some good points. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, sure. Okay, let's get that character in there. Let's get, you know, and some people liked her, you know. I think it's just really important to show that in your work that there's all these different perspectives that clash. And like, Arlo is not necessarily a bad guy in that, but he's done some rough stuff, you know, and he's duty bound. So, you know, it's funny. There are some situations, like when my wife finished reading that, she goes, well, why didn't he do this? Well, he didn't know that. Oh, well, yeah, I guess he didn't. You know, like, I don't want to give anything away. I'm trying to do it without spoilers.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I like that. I like playing with philosophy. I like playing with where they go. And how are you on that?
I'm very much like, I have the mind either a curse or a gift for duality thinking. Like, I can see both sides of the argument, and I think you need to have that when you're writing a book, just to have a more fleshed out world. Because if you have everyone thinking the exact same, it's quite boring.
Yeah, I feel like I'll read books sometimes, and it's like everybody thinks this way, and you're like, okay,
sure. And like no one questions it.
Yeah.
And like, I know that there's a church in my group, or my book, and it's very much challenging the traditional ways of thinking. And it's just this little egg seed to show that, you know, not everyone believes in the gods. There's all these other extra mindsets, and you have to have that thing to make a greater world and immerse the reader.
Yeah. And we learn, I feel like, because we have to study so much for this stuff, you know, we have to do the research and that stuff. Like, I love learning about different religions, different beliefs, and different, you know, like the mythology of ancient cultures. And you find some really cool similarities, and you find some vast differences that you wouldn't expect. Like, kind of interesting. Like, there's actually a lot of similarities between the later Norse religion and Christianity. You see a lot of that self-sacrifice, that kind of, but it didn't come around. Like, it's like the Valkyries, right? You have the old Valkyries that they used to believe in, and they were mean, dirty, nasty, demonic looking, like they were not something. But then you get the later Valkyries when Christianity had applied, and they're more like almost angels, right? Like, they're these beautiful women. They're not so much the why, you know. When I was writing that book that I didn't publish, Gods Reborn, there's Valkyries in it. And there is a difference between the ones that were believed in, the old ones, and then the ones that came about later. So yeah, it's kind of fun to find those, you know, and how they impacted each other, stuff like that. So
yeah. And I know when I was like researching my book, my book has a shit ton of monsters in it.
Yeah.
So I took monsters from all these different cultures in the world. And it was funny when I took from cultures like Japan and China, their monsters were more, not so much as Western as like monsters that come and eat you. These ones are just like mischievous beings.
Yeah. I've done some of that, or circumstantial. In certain circumstances, they'll be really terrible. In others, they'll be very cordial. And you're going, and interesting how that worked. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was fun to research that and then throw those into my world. And then
that's cool. Yeah. I like that's fun.
And then we got a question from Alan or Jacob. He signed Jacob at the end. Do you think you've ever encountered evil? In my books, I explore whether it exists, or at least do people acknowledge they are evil, or they justify their actions to themselves?
Yeah, I have. I've encountered a few evil people. Now, when I say that, like, I don't personally believe somebody is born evil. I believe that through circumstances and choices, you decide how much you're going to go down that pit. You know, like, I can't say names, stuff like that. I work in corrections, so I can't say that, like, oh, I run into so many evil. No, I don't. Like, the guys I work with, 99% of them just made some dumb decisions. They made some dumb decisions. They're in the wrong crowd. They need to get out, right? I've run into a few that they get pleasure out of the pain they cause. And, and it's kind of shifted my worldview. I think there are creators in this world, and I think there are destroyers in this world. And there are some people that embrace that. So, yeah, I'd say I've encountered it. But I don't know. I mean, everybody's going to have those different perspectives on it. I truly believe there is evil in the world, but I also believe there's good. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the show on Netflix? I think it's like Mindless.
I don't think I'm familiar with it.
It's basically a true story about how the FBI developed criminal psychology.
Oh, yes. I think my wife and I were watching that like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
It's Mind something. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember what it is. It's not Mindless, but like two seasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a pair of authors that are figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like when they interview like Ed Kemper, the serial killer, Mindhunter. Thank you, Alan. And Ed, when they're interviewing Ed Kemper, he describes like why he does what he does, or what he did, why he's a serial killer. It really resonates that,
yeah,
people's aren't born evil. It's just the environment that they're brought into.
Yeah. And again, I think voice has a bit. Yeah. I've known some people from terrible situations. You hear awful things. Like some of the people I've run into that, like one of the people I ran into that I believe will do nothing but try to cause harm in the world. You listen to that guy's story and you get it. You know exactly why he's twisted. You know when your parent tests their needles out on you before they test it on themselves, before they start shooting up, when there's some foul stuff in the world. And especially like I have almost no remorse for a parent that abuses a child. Right. Mm-hmm. Like that does something like the stuff you hear sometimes, and you're just like, your heart breaks for a sec. Cause you're just like, man, you had no shot. Like you were just crafted into this thing, weren't you? Testing the needles, living with a pedophile uncle, and they're abused, they've had drugs shot into them before they even hit puberty. And you're like, yeah, that individual thought it was funny to knock up as many gals as he could. I thought that was hilarious. And I tell him, go, man, that's evil. That is evil. I said, you got any intention of taking care of those kids? Why would I?
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, there's evil in the world.
A book, sorry to cut you off. A book that, because of my metal background, there's a band from Flint, Michigan. And I don't know if you know lots about Flint, Michigan or not.
A little bit. Not a ton, I would say. Just a little.
Just an awful city once GM pulled out.
Yeah.
Once it basically became the Wild West. And this band came out and they were talking about killing and the crime they've seen. And everyone kind of wrote them off in the music industry. And then their lead singer, David Gunn, wrote a memoir. It's A Summertime in Murder Town, How I Survived Where the Best Die. I recommend it to anyone. And you read about his life story and you're like, holy shit, you were just dealt a bad hand at life.
Yeah.
And he talks about like how he had to kill people because he had no choice. It was do or die in that situation. He was raised by a gang. He didn't have families. And then he was just like basically, and if you give up, everyone knows that you're like a chump or no backbone, and then you got a target on your back. So he's like, I was forced to do these things that I knew was wrong.
I work with a guy that grew up in gangland, a couple guys, and it what they went through in order to stay on the straight and narrow, man, like that's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
You know, like that's why like I get these guys that come in and none of them have a father. I mean, very few. And there's just no guidance, and the gang life calls to them because that's who they're aiming for. They're aiming for those guys those young men that have no guidance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they suck them up, and then that's when the twisting starts. You know, twist your brain a little bit. Now you're thinking, you know, but you when evil touches your life, I think you just, you know, even like soldiers get dark, gritty humor. It's like my uncle talks about when, you know, he talked to the old guys that were in Nam and stuff like that. They got a dark sense of humor because that's how you cope with it. You cope with a really, I mean, when you're seeing your buddies dying every other day and, you know, you're seeing horrendous things happen, your humor is going to get a little dark. How it goes. You're touched by it.
I talked to a buddy of mine who was in Afghanistan for a couple of tours, and he said the movie Jarhead is probably the closest thing to what it's actually like over there.
Yeah.
Just like, and not in terms of the action or anything, but just in terms of like the culture, just that dark humor, and you know, you gotta do what you gotta do to survive.
Yeah.
So it's really messed up. But that was a huge tangent on good and evil, and
so you know, it just comes out.
Yeah, I know. Oh, it's fun to go on tangents sometime. So getting back to books and literature, top reads of 2021.
Okay. Fan of Jim Butcher, his last 2 books that came out. I read them. I had COVID like 3-4 weeks back now, a month ago. And once I got past some of the brain fog and I didn't feel like I was dying, man, I ate those books. I read those 2 books in 2 days. And it hit hard. It brought a lot of nostalgia back. So definitely Battlegrounds. Peace Talks is kind of a setup. Battleground was awesome. Anthony Ryan's The Pariah was a cat. Man, that was a great read.
I gotta get that one. That's on my TBR.
Honestly, I picked it up and then I kind of set it down because I just had a lot going on. And then I really picked it. You know when you like try to read but you're not really into it at the moment. Mm-hmm. Then I sat down with the intention to read, and I ate that thing alive in like 3 days. Like it was like every night after work, and then I just sit down and read until it was bedtime. Like he had me hooked. Like that was a great book. Last one would be Evan Winter's Rage of Dragons was his first book.
Oh yeah.
I think on his second one. Oh, something fire.
Yeah.
I think my dad has it. Or it's out in my garage. I'm still working on my study right now. Yeah, that guy, that Evan Winters is a talent, man. His 2 books, that guy, he's up there with Gemmel for me right now. It's been a good year, I think, so far for some reads. Like I've had some big books I've really enjoyed. So yeah, those would be my top reads so far this year.
Yeah, for me, I've read a lot of self-published this year because I'm just trying to get into it and discover what's not just traditionally published.
Oh yeah.
And top reads, definitely Godless Lands is in there. We Men of Ash and Shadows. Oh, is it Fires of Vengeance? Holly's asking.
Fires of Vengeance. Thank you, Holly.
And one I'm reading right now is The Hellborn King by Christopher Brenning. And it just got released like in February of this year or something like that. And I'm working my way through it. It's like 600 some pages, but like it's a good self-published book. The only thing I wish he would have done is that it's not a flaw on him at all. It's his editor. They've missed some things. So you see the odd typo and it's just like, oh.
Well, that's honestly, that's what hit Godless Lands out of last year's SBFBO. Okay. Honestly, I learned my lesson on that one. There's some editing stuff in there that needs to be touched up, but I plan to have it re-edited here in the next, before I release the next Godless Lands, because it'll be out, I'm thinking late winter, early spring. I think I'll get the next Godless Lands book out. So Yeah, it's something that needs to be done. I mean, it doesn't bother 90% of readers, but
Hmm.
I've gone back through it. I was like, crap, how did I miss it?
Yeah.
You can't catch it all, and you need to pay some, like, if any, like, authors, starting authors are getting into it, pay. Just pay. Save up your money, pay a good editor. It's worth it. It'll save you a headache. You know, yeah.
Yeah, I'm lucky that like again, I don't know if you know much about my story of how I got published, but I did the cardinal sin of self-publishing. I went with a vanity press,
Ooh, yeah.
and I lucked out, I think, and got a good one.
Oh man. Yeah.
And because I talked to other self-published authors, they're like, and I tell them what I went through, and they're like, man, like that is not typical at all for a vanity press. Like you must have found the needle in the haystack.
Who'd you go?
Because Friesen Press is what they're called.
Huh.
They're based in Canada, and like I got a good editor who wasn't just like, yeah, looks great, great work. They actually gave me feedback like, no, you got to completely get rid of this passage. You need to completely change this up. So like I really went through the works. I'm lucky I did that way, because the first draft of Oathbreaker was pretty horrendous. Looking back on it now.
Yeah. We're growing, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's growing pains too. Like you
Yeah.
just you gotta do it, and a good editor will just take you to a whole nother level.
Yeah, they really will. Yeah, I've worked with two. I really like both of them. I would always recommend them. You know, like they have both have strengths, both have weaknesses. Yeah, I wouldn't even say they both have weaknesses. They both just focus on different aspects. You know, but yeah, it's definitely worth it. Do your anybody out there that's watching, do your research, talk with editors, get a good feel, find somebody you connect with, and pony up the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, it makes life easier. Like, I remember because I actually had to, when Godless came out, some people pointed out some stuff, and I went right in to fix it. I fixed it, updated it, boom. But I know there's still a few things in there, you know, things that just sit in the very back of your head, and you're like, something I got to do. It's 90% of the people don't care, but there's that 10% that it's going to bug, and it's going to bug me because I'm in there. So now I got to get it done.
I know I'm developing Oathbreaker's audiobook, and I'm listening back to each chapter. I'm like, oh, wish I could. Like you just hear that one thing. Like I would change that. I would change those 3 words into something different.
Yep. Yeah. Go. Yeah. Like I reread my stuff, and I'm not by any means like trashing it, but like there's parts that I go, I could have done that better. I could have written that better. I bet I could have explained this a little bit more. You know, like you do that, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to do that next book, because like
Exactly.
people constantly going back to their old book, going back, and you're like, you're not progressing. You're just sitting in your little pool, and you're not going to make the masterpiece. Just move on and write something new, and maybe that'll be your like find that in a new story, because that one's done.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I am. I had to get Oathbreaker out there, otherwise I would have just sat on it for years, and I'd still be touching it up.
Yeah, I mean, really, yeah.
So, future projects. What's on the go for Mr. Crow in the future?
So I mentioned I'm working through the next Godless novel. Going to be considerably longer, I think. I don't think I can write shorter stories anymore. Just growing with what I'm learning, and the worlds are building and all that. So Godless Lands, and then I think before 2022 is over, I should be able to get out, or around that time, I'm hoping to get the third Valhalla Steelbook. Those are my goals for this year. Overall, like long term, I figure there's going to be 3 books in Godless Lands, at least 3 books, 4 books in Valhalla Steel, and then I think once those are done, I'm going to go back to that Gods Reborn and revamp it, because I think that is definitely a story worth telling, and it would be my epic level story, like the tome. Yeah. So that's kind of the plan for the future. We'll see how it goes with anything. I mean, life happens sometimes. That's the thing I've learned. Like I'm really big about setting goals. Like I like to publicly announce goals sometimes too, just so that I know people will hold my toes to the fire, and it'll force me to probably work some late nights trying to write that crap up, but I'll get it, you know? So I'm a big goal setter. And that's the goal. So 2 releases for 2022 is what I'm aiming for. One at the beginning of the year, one at the end of the year. So I think I can swing that. I've swung it so far. I've got 3 out in about a year and a half. So I feel like I can get these 2.
So, well, I'll definitely hold you accountable to that because
I need it.
Valhalla Steel is my next TBR. For me, right now I have like half of the Oathbreaker sequel written.
Okay.
And then I caught this other, I woke up from a dream actually, this other story, and I was like, I gotta write this story. So I kind of just squirreled and went to completely started a whole new story, and I'm almost done it. I'm on Act 3 now. I got probably about 100 pages left.
Nice.
Give or take. And then it's the beta reading, editing, proofreading. So hopefully it's going to be out early 2022. I was hoping to get it out before PitMad in December, but I don't think I'm going to have that all edited in time because I'm a slow reader.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Honestly, I'm normally a slow reader. I know I said I read those 2 books in 2 days, but I was sick. I was doing nothing else. And like, that's like one of my all-time favorite authors I hadn't read in a while. So there are moments where I'll just like eat something alive. And then there's others where I'm like, okay, we're going to ease into this.
Yeah. And then I got an inkling for a 3rd story that actually was inspired by Holly Tinsley's and an urban fantasy. So yeah, I read her book and I was like, and I just started sparking all these ideas. And it's kind of like, if I can give anything away, it's kind of like her book meets Anthony Ryan's Raven Shadows series.
Yeah, that sounds.
So, yeah.
I hate to say it, Tinsley, if you're still on, I am going to read your book. I really, because she wrote a review for Valhalla Steel, and I was like, this gal's got some good prose. Like just how she wrote the review, I was like, okay, I got to read her book. Like it's on my list. I've been trying to like knock down my list. I'm now getting into the indie authors. Like right now, I'm reading Phipps's Agent. I'm drawing a total blank on it. He's kind of a grimdark writer, but it's a cyberpunk series about basically a guy that's had his brain wiped, and he's just you come into agreement with this corporation, they wipe your memory, retrain you, and then after I think like a 10-year stint, they'll give you your memories back. So just so in that 10-year period, they'll pay you really, really well, but you won't remember your past life because you're an instrument of death at that point. And it's kind of interesting. So I'm getting into that. And then I think it'll be Tinsley's book, because I just read, I've got a list on there of just like indie authors I got to hit up and read their books. Frank Dorian sent me his book I've got to read. And then I should be open. So maybe I can slip an Oathbreaker after that.
Yeah, well, I'd love to send you a copy if you're open to it.
I'll buy it. I always want to buy everybody's work. You know, that's how we make. That's how you get that verified review. That's how you get all that. So don't even worry about sending it. I'll buy it.
Okay. And then last before we go, what would you rather fight? An orangutan once a year or a chicken every time you go into your house?
I would fight chicken every time I go into my house because I can kick a chicken, but orangutan will rip my arm out of my socket. So
yeah. I was an orangutan. I always said, "Oh, I'll fight an orangutan," until I looked like the tail of the tape, and I was like, "Ooh, yeah, I don't stack up again." They have like a 500-pound grip strength. I'm like, "Ooh."
It can like if a chimp can rip my arm. Like I was watching the show. Yeah, a chimp can rip a limb off. It's like if a chimp can do it, an orangutan is a bigger monkey.
Yeah,
thing would just snap my neck and rip out everything. I would.
I know. Well, we were at a pub later or a couple of weeks ago with me and my buddies, and we had this debate, and like we were screaming at each other from across the table, and then basically the entire like bar was like looking at us and like, what are you guys arguing about? So then and then we had basically the entire bar on 2 sides. People were shouting why it should be an orangutan. Other people were shouting why it should be a chicken. People had their phones up or shouting like stats, like the orangutan can lift 1,000 pounds, and like it's a chicken. Oh, it was probably one of the wildest nights I've ever had in my life. But
some chickens can be mean, though. A farm chicken, a farm rooster, they're mean.
They are mean.
chase you around with their little spurs. Okay.
Yeah.
Question with the orangutan though. Do I get to be armed?
Only what you can craft. So if you can craft a mean bow.
No, I'm gonna kick a chicken. I'm not
Yeah.
that.
And Holly, one last comment from Holly. Valhalla Steel is one of the most fun books I've read.
Thanks, Holly.
All right. So before we go, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. We kind of went a little bit over than what I anticipated. But for those who are looking to purchase your works, where can we get Valhalla Steel and Godless Lands and Quenched in Blood?
They're all on Amazon. You can get them all on Amazon. I know some people do orders. I'm backtracked. I got to get my book out to a bunch of people, mail them over. So I don't normally do that, but for special occasions I might. But just order them on Amazon. That's the easiest way.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks everyone for tuning in and asking your questions. And we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, man.
Yeah.